So the premise behind why we are doing this Into the Wild series, actually, I got this topic like years before I was even doing this. I've had it in my notes. I was like, if I ever do a series, it's going to be called Into the Wild. And that's because I was going through my wilderness season. And it was about 7 good years. I remember just like chaos. I feel like not really chaos. I think it's not the right word. I think it was just not knowing what's next. It really started once I finished college and I left my church home at the time, which I grew up there for the most part. My mom was there. I was active in all aspects of ministry. I was over the dance ministry. I was a minister. I was helping in youth department. So I was everywhere in the church. And I literally was at work one day and God was like, you have to leave. And I had been battling that thought of leaving the church probably for over 2 years. I would visit other churches. I was going to Lakewood. I was going to African churches out here. I was everywhere trying to get what I needed, but at the same time, I was never being fed because I would get it at those places, but that wasn't my church home, so it wasn't consistent. And so when I finally left, I just left abruptly. I sent the emails like, "Hey, this will be my last day at the church." And the pastor called me and was like, "Well, what is it?" And I'm looking back, probably shouldn't have said it how I said it, but I told him, I said, this church just doesn't have what I need to get to my next level. And he was like, oh, okay. And so yeah, now hindsight, I'm like, oh, Chris, that was kind of crazy. You probably shouldn't have said it like that. I probably should have just said, kept it politically correct. It's just my season to go somewhere else. As everybody says, my season here is ended. I probably should have said that instead of what I said, but maybe he needed to hear it. I don't know. But after that, I just felt lost because dance ministry, even though I was dancing outside of the church as well, um, I still felt like this isn't enough. I felt kind of like I was just out there and like God was not talking back to me. It was like, Lord, you are very quiet right now, and I cannot hear you on what's next. Like, where's my next church? I had joined another church, but even there, I felt like just another number. And so I was still kind of lost in regards of a church home. I was lost in the aspects of personal ministry. Like, what does this mean for me now? Because I wasn't active in ministry anymore because everything that I did happened at that church. And so now I was looking like, well, what does this look like for me? Where do I go from here? And it took 7 years to figure that out. And even that, like getting married in the midst of that, like it was a lot of good things that happened. But even in those good things that happened, I still had this sense of what's next? What about me? Um, and what does this mean for me? I had a lot of questions for God, and I just felt like He was not answering. But He eventually He did, and I realized that whole time of being in my wilderness season was a time of pruning. It was a time of cultivating the gifts that I had, because at the time I did not know I had a prophetic gift. When I was at that church, I did not know I was prophetic. I didn't even think about. I knew of the prophetic. I knew people prophesied, but I didn't see that for myself. I didn't even realize a lot of things that I did were actually apostolic in nature. I didn't realize my DNA was always there, because no one there had the tools that I needed. So in theory, I was correct. Like they didn't have what I needed at that church. But it took me to 2021. So that was 2016, I think, that I left there. 2021 is when I found the church home that I'm at now. And this is the only church that I can say I've been in that I'm like, I think I finally have found my people. I think I have finally found a senior leader that has the language for where I am and has also been where I've been. And so I feel like now I'm in a place that cultivates who I am now. And so I don't know if any of us can identify with that, but that was my wilderness experience. Of course, there's more to the story, a whole lot more. But that's why this series was important to me. And so it came back to go into this wilderness season because I think a lot of people kept coming up in our Bible studies. And even just in talking, the wilderness would come up. And so I was like, okay, I think God is highlighting this for a reason. So I feel like it's a great thing for us to go into for the next few weeks. We'll go through people in the Bible that have been in a wilderness season, have gone into the wilderness, and we're going to see how God uses that experience to truly cultivate and develop them for leadership, for ministry, for life in general. And so I'm excited about this. I know it's going to be good, especially tonight. I'm excited about this topic. I actually wasn't going to go with this particular person, but when God highlighted this person, I was like, oh yeah, this is a good one. So we are going to be reading Genesis 16, and I have all these screens. So I'm going to close the chat. So if y'all say something, I won't see it right now, but I'll come back. All right, so we're going to read Genesis 16. I'm going to read the whole thing so everybody can have context on what's going on here, and then we'll go into some background knowledge on what the wilderness is. Let me, hold on. This gum, it's got to go. I'm just going to swallow it. That's so ghetto. All right, here we go. So verse 1, it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, now behold, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I will obtain children through her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. After Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, the Egyptian, her maid, and gave her to her husband, Abram, as his wife. He went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her sight. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done me be upon you. I give my maid into your arms. But when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her sight. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your maid is in your power. Do to her what is good in your sight. So Sarai treated her harshly, and she fled from her presence. Verse 7, now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to the shore. He said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself to her authority. Verse 10, moreover, the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they will be too many in count. The angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are with child, and you will bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. And he will live in the east of all his brothers. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God who sees. For she said, have I even remained alive here after seeing him? Therefore the well was called Beer-lahai-roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Beerd. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. So what is the wilderness? The wilderness is a place, of course, of solitude. It's dry, it's barren. Nothing is productive here. It's like, God, what is happening? You just don't see resources. You don't see people. You're just by yourself. But there are three things that happen in the wilderness, and that's promise, process, and promotion. And we see that throughout the Bible. When people go to the wilderness, there's a covenant that is made either before or after. There's a process that they go through in that wilderness that strengthens them for their promotion. And so once that promotion takes place, we usually see the covenant being fulfilled, that promise being fulfilled. And y'all can tell me to slow down in the chat if I need to, if I'm going too fast. So if you're taking notes. All right, so let's chat. You can come off mute. You can put it in the chat, whichever one. Name a person who went into the wilderness in the Bible. Just fun facts that we may all know. You can just, however you want to do it, chat or say it out loud.
Would Paul be considered? Because he sure had to do that long road to the basket, blind and can't see.
Yes, Paul. Yes, Jeremiah. Anyone else?
I want to say Moses too, right? I feel like he had his wilderness season.
Most definitely.
At some point.
Yeah, I see Amber. David. Yeah, David. Yeah, David was a good one. We're going to definitely talk about him. And we're definitely going to talk about Moses. That's actually who God had me study in my wilderness season, and he made me study him from an aspect of leadership. At the time, I didn't get it because I was like, oh, not that I don't care, but like, what does this have to do with me? That's how I felt. But now hindsight, it's like, okay, I get it. So yeah. Anyone else?
Father Abraham.
Yes, Abraham definitely went, and that's actually who we were going to talk about tonight. And then when I was getting the notes together for that, I was like, no, you're going to focus on Hagar. So, oh, okay. So, yeah, but we'll still talk a little bit about Abram's wilderness. Yes, Elijah. All right. So here are some people that I just mentioned. You guys can write these down if you wish. So Hagar, of course, in Genesis 16, Moses, David, Elijah, John the Baptist, Jesus, and Paul. And I forgot who was talking about Jesus' wilderness experience recently. I feel like it was a sermon that I was watching that really pretty much confirmed this series and how the Holy Spirit descended upon him. It's like no one goes into the wilderness without having the Holy Spirit lead them there. It's always Holy Spirit induced when you go into a wilderness season. It's almost, and just like we said with that promise, it comes before going into your process. God gives you this great encounter. This is when you get your prophetic word that tells you you're gonna be a millionaire. You're gonna have daughters and mentees and all these great things, the things that make you go, oh, thank you, Jesus. You shouting in church, falling out, and all the great things. And then about 7 days later, all hell breaks loose. And then now you're in your wilderness experience for the next 7 years, 3 years, however long it is. Because it's never 2 months. It's never 30 days. So yeah.
Never. Okay.
Never.
Never a quick turnaround. Never.
Never quick turnaround. Not at all. It's not return to sender either. So we have to go through it. And I think tonight is going to be more of an attitude check type of thing with the wilderness experience. So it's gonna be good. I pray. All right, so now I want to go into some historical facts based on the text that we read from Genesis 16 before we go into looking at the biblical context and just the revelation that we can pull from it. So let me pull my notes up too, because I want to make sure I have some things that I did not write on the screen. So in ancient I can never say it. Let me look at the word Mesopotamia. I can say it when I see the word. I can't say it when I'm not looking at it. They had a code of basically a code of laws, and it's called Hammurabi. And so these laws were produced to basically keep the ones that were superior from making the weak feel like slaves. And for taking advantage of them, and also, but to keep things in check when it came according to who had rights to property, money, all those things. Basically their inheritance. It was 282 laws under this code. It was basically religious code. And if we think about it, it's bondage, straight up bondage, because I can't remember 282 laws. I barely remember the law when it comes to driving every day. I'm like, oh, I'm speeding. Let me slow down. So to remember 282 laws is crazy. But they had them and they tried to keep them the best way they could. And so one of those laws that we're going to talk about today is the one that would cause a wife that could not bear her children to go get a slave or a concubine. And so basically, if a wife couldn't have kids within 2 years of being married, they were required to go get another woman to sleep with their husband to have a baby. Crazy stuff. So glad we're not there. So now we're going to look at some biblical context when it comes to Genesis 16, giving background information on what is happening before this and what's going to happen. So basically in Genesis 15, we see God, this is when Abram and his wife, they had to leave Egypt because, the king found out that Sarai is married. You got to go take your wife, take all y'all stuff and get up out of here because y'all caused a whole plague to come into my kingdom and affect us. So take everything with you and go. While in their journey, in their wilderness, Abram has an encounter with God. And so this is when the Lord says, I'm going to actually read it. Okay, so God comes to him in Genesis 15:1. It says, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your reward will be very great. But Abram said, Lord God, what can you give me since I'm a childless and heir of my house is Elzer of Damascus? Abram continued, look, you have given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house will be my heir. Now the word of the Lord came to him, this one will not be your heir. Instead, one who comes from your own body will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look at the sky and count the stars, if you want to be able to count them. Then he said to him, your offspring will be numerous. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited to him as righteousness. And so it continues on basically in verse 13. It goes, then the Lord says to Abram, know this for certain, your offspring will be resident aliens for 400 years in a land that does not belong to them and will be enslaved and oppressed. This is talking about the Israelites in Egypt. So basically the time of Moses, from before being a baby, before even being born, they're in captivity to being born. So we see that play out in the book of Exodus. Let me see. Okay, so then we also have Sarai, who's Abram's wife. She's 76. She's 10 years younger than Abram, which that is told in Genesis 20. Yeah, my kids are babysitting themselves, so this is gonna be interesting because I think I hear Roman coming, but we're gonna keep going. And so Sarai is infertile. Sarai, she's infertile. She's struggling to have a baby. She's doing the best that she can to give her husband a child, but she can't. So this is when they have Sarai the slave. Okay, give me 1 second. I will. So we see how when they have to leave from the Pharaoh's house, the king's house, because they figured out, you're married, y'all got to get up out of here. From certain researchers or theologians, they say that Hagar was actually Pharaoh's daughter. I don't think so. I actually think that Hagar was one of the other concubines that was in the same concubine group that Sarai was in, because the king, of course, has several of them. And so when he said, take everything with you, he also gave them a concubine. And so I believe that was Hagar. But of course, some people say that Hagar was his daughter, but there's nothing in the Bible that says that explicitly. So we use our context clues, I guess, or just do some inferring and just figure it out. But if anybody else knows, definitely share. Pull the chat back up. All right. But yeah, I'm definitely interested. So who is Hagar? Her name means alien or foreigner in some translations, but in the Hebrew and the Greek, which matter most to interpreting the Bible, it means flight, which is, pretty much on brand for what Hagar does, because she's a runner, she's a track star. But she's also an Egyptian slave woman, and her experience actually parallels the experience that the Israelites would have. She's in bondage as an Egyptian to a man that will have a legacy and descendants that are Israelites. And so she's in bondage now, but eventually we'll see how her story parallels the experience of the Israelites. Let me make sure that I got all those right. Okay, so Hagar has 2 wilderness experiences. One is when she travels to Beer Laharoy. And we have the map, and you'll see it's the furthest away. This is where we'll see where she fleds here. And so she actually is found by the angel of the Lord right here at Shur, at a little bank or a stream of water there. And her second flight is to Beersheba, when she's sent there by Abram, in which we're going to read that in Genesis 21. So those are her 2 flights. All right, so now let's discuss flight number 1. Any questions so far?
You gonna post this PowerPoint, right?
Yes, I'm gonna post it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was hoping so. I was like, who gonna ask me?
Yes, I'm definitely gonna post it. All right, so flight number 1. The points that we are going to get from this, of course, is to check our emotions. We see this in Genesis 12. verse, did I say 12? It's supposed to be Genesis 16. So 12 is actually 16. Genesis 16 verses 1 through 9. I'm going to go through that and just point some things out. So we see, let's look at verse 2, where it says, Sarai said to Abram, since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, go to my slave. Perhaps through her, I can build a family. Sarai is already in her feelings when we open up this chapter. She can't have kids. She's blaming the Lord. She said, he prevented me from having kids. So she's most likely feeling desperate, anxious, depressed, every negative emotion that she can feel. As a woman that can't have children and you know you can't, you're trying, it can cause a lot of negative feelings. And so I'm pretty sure Abram was like, you know what, I'm going to agree to it because he also wants to have kids. He has this promise for God. So he's also trying to manufacture this promise to take place by doing whatever he can do. But on the flip side, I think, this is just me thinking, your wife is sad, she's upset, you want to do whatever you can to give your wife what she wants. So if that causes me to have to sleep with the slave girl, the concubine, the Hagar, whatever we want to call her, I'm going to do that to make my wife happy. But also, I think that this is also what God was saying. And I think we all have been there where God gives you a promise, gives you the prophecy, and we don't know how it's going to happen. So every time something comes up to us that could potentially be the promise being trying to be fulfilled, we're like, okay, let's go that way. And God's like, no, not yet. And I noticed with God, he'll give us a promise and it can take years for that thing to take place. Sometimes it can happen suddenly, but most times it's years before we see it take place. And so I just think that Abraham here was like, I think this is what God meant when he said, I'm going to have an heir, so let me just go this route. Instead of him being patient and really seeking God to say, okay, Lord, is this what you want me to do? He listened to his wife. This is another Adam, basically. The wife came with an idea. I'm going to follow what my wife said because that must be right. So we see here, emotions are already behind this decision that Hagar is doing, that Sarai is doing. And so in verse 4, after he slept with Hagar, she became pregnant. Hagar found out she was pregnant, and now she despises Sarai because she realizes, I've been bamboozled. Y'all used me to get me pregnant. She's already in captivity, so she's probably upset every day that she's in captivity because she's in bondage. She's feeling abused. She's feeling overlooked. She's feeling not seen. Probably some of her needs are probably not all met. She's pretty sure she get the basic necessities, but do you think her masters are going to give them everything that she wants? She's there to serve them in the capacity that they want. So some of her needs probably were not met that she would want. And so there's a lot of feelings of abandonment and abuse and just low self-esteem that I'm sure that was there. And now you have Sarai who's self-destructive because instead of me waiting on God, trusting God, and believing in the word that he gave my husband, I'm going to go out here and do this on my own. So I'm self-destructing what I think I want because I'm thinking if God's not going to do it, let me do it myself. So now I'm about to just destroy all this stuff and don't even realize it. And so in verse 5, it says, then Sarai says to Abram, you are responsible for my suffering. So now she's blaming him. Sarai is a what they calling people? She points fingers. She points fingers. She does not know how to take accountability for what she's doing. Now, granted, the infertility is not an issue that she may have caused upon herself, but it is something that she has to go through. So instead of her asking God, what's my lesson from this? Because that's one of my things. If I'm going through something, Lord, what is my lesson? So that I don't have to repeat this again. Instead of me doing things impulsively and making decisions that don't make sense, let me ask what my lesson is. Until you give me an answer, I'm not doing nothing. And so Sarai here, again, blaming Abram when she was the one that presented him this proposition. She said, I put my slave in your arms. She saw she was pregnant, and now she's despising me. And then Abraham says, well, treat her, do with her what you want. So Sarai begins to mistreat her, abusing her. We don't know what this abuse looks like, but I can imagine she's probably very rude, nice, nasty to her. I would hope she ain't touched the lady, but I feel like if she's pregnant, I don't think so. It might be a little tussle there. But I feel like just, you can tell when someone doesn't like you. Everything about them says it in their action and the way they talk. They will make you feel like you don't belong. And so this again plays on Hagar's feelings, because now I feel like I don't belong here because I don't belong here. Now I'm having your child. This isn't even my child. I don't want this child. It's probably how she felt. And so she runs. She tries to run back to where her family is, thinking that would solve the problem, instead of asking God, how do I handle this? She allowed her trauma to cause her to respond. Because now every negative emotion that I have is playing on everything that I already feel about myself. So because you mistreat me, I'm going to allow you to let me run. Because you mistreat me, I'm going to, just take myself out of what I think is misery and now put myself through even more misery, because I'm pretty sure walking that long of a distance, because we saw on the map, she was in Hebron. We're gonna get it. She was in Hebron, and she's trying to go all the way down to oh y'all, these words are tearing me up. But but she was trying to go down there, right? And that's a long trek. And you're a pregnant woman after this call, okay? Here. Yeah. Okay. There you go. All right. So yeah, that's a long trek for a pregnant person. So I'm pretty sure you putting yourself through even more misery now. Where was I? Okay, so yeah. So now we see. Oh, actually, I just want to make sure I do a little internal check here first before we move on. Checking with our emotions, how we respond to situations. I know it can be hard when we're in the most difficult season of your life. I think my most difficult season was being a classroom teacher. Very difficult, especially because I wanted to be there, I thought, but at the same time, there was just so much. I just felt like there was no support. I feel like the kids were horrible. I feel like I had the worst pick of the bunch. I'm like, did they give me a class is this a prank? Am I on pump? What is happening? Because why do I have to break up fights almost every day? I'm like, this can't be a classroom, man. Like, it's just all kind of thoughts going through my head. It was horrible, y'all. When I say horrible, it was horrible. And so I had to check my emotions, because I applied to jobs all the time, all throughout the school year. It didn't matter what day it was, I was applying to a job, but God wouldn't let me leave, because I was called to be in that season for a reason. And so heart check, emotion check, whatever it is you want to check. Ask God now, like, what am I running from? What have I allowed my emotions to take me out of that you're actually using to process me? Because her being in the house with Hagar, with Sarai and Abram, and going through this situation was actually a process. She was already low-key in a wilderness. May not have looked like a wilderness, but her having to be in that house with two people that don't love her, just being honest, they don't love her, because if they did, they wouldn't have done to her what they did. So they don't love her. And so now she's having to deal with feelings of not being loved either. And so now her feelings are driving her reactions and her decisions. So what decisions have you allowed to be made through your emotions? Allow God to bring that back to mind. You can marinate on those thoughts all night long, until you get the answer, because then there's some things that you're going to have to go back to, which we're going to talk about now, which is don't abandon your assignment. I really got Genesis 12 through all throughout here, huh? That's crazy. So yeah, Genesis 16, I can't see. Yeah, still verse 1 through 9. This is what we're referencing. So don't abandon your assignment, because we see in verse, I'm actually going to read verse 7 through 9. It says, the angel of the Lord found her by a spring in the wilderness, a spring on the way to Shur. He said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm pretty sure the angel of the Lord did not ask this question because he didn't know. He already knew. It was more first of all, the Lord does this a lot. I realize in the Bible, he asks questions that he don't need answers to, but he asks them in a way, I think it's to bring awareness to us. Like, what are you doing? It's kind of like that. It's like, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? And so then in verse 9, Well, she says it. She says, I'm running away from the mistress, Sarai. So she's running from her assignment and doesn't even realize it. She's running from what God is using in her life, and she doesn't realize it. So verse 9, it says, the angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her authority. That's a huge pill to swallow, and I'm pretty sure it is one thing that brings on humility to Hagar, because you're telling me to go back to being mistreated. You're telling me to go back to being in a place that they don't love me. You're telling me to go back into a place where I was abandoned, I was used. You want me to go back? Really? Really, Lord? So I can imagine the disgust that she probably felt with these instructions when she heard that. But then the angel of the Lord said to her, do I want to go there? No, we're going to wait. I'm going to wait. So yeah, we're going to wait. So he tells her to go back. So when he's talking, when the angel of the Lord is actually talking, I want to go to Genesis 15 because it parallels what God also told Abraham or Abram. In verse 13, the Lord tells Abram, know this for certain, your offspring will be resident aliens for 400 years in a land that does not belong to them and will be enslaved and oppressed. And so in chapter 16, we see, I guess I will go to verse 10. So verse 10, it does say, the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your offsprings and there will be too many to count. So right here, we see a parallel between a promise that was made to Abram and a promise that was made to Hagar, which lets us know now that she's pregnant with promise, which is a whole word. What she deemed as, probably a curse was actually a promise. So she had to be in that house. She had to be mistreated by them. All of it was allowed to happen to her because God knew that he had a promise that needed to be fulfilled at the same time. And though Sarai, she manufactured this whole thing to happen, God still made it work out for her good. Well, for Hagar's good, not Sarai's good, because she caused all kind of havoc. But for Hagar's good, it still works out for her good. But that's a whole word in itself. I'm thinking just like how we need to really be careful with manufacturing things because we'll cause something else to happen. God can still be God and make it turn into this beautiful thing. But now there's so many other consequences that go along with you creating your own promise or false sense of a promise. All right, so in verse 13, when the angel of the Lord states that the children will be enslaved and they will be degraded before their redemption, this is also foreshadowing what the Israelites would do. So, well, actually, for Hagar would do what Hagar would go through. So right now, she's being in bondage, she's being mistreated, but she will be redeemed, and we'll see her redemption story at the end. All right, I already talked about that. Okay, so let's talk for a moment and let's talk about what assignments are we currently running from. And I know some of us don't want to talk about it.
Not trying to be in our business. That's crazy.
But what assignments are we running from that God is telling you, you got to do it? You may not want to.
All of them.
She said all of them. That's crazy.
Right, Amber? Right?
We got to get back on it. You got to get back to your assignment. There's promise. There's promise in it. There's redemption in it. So much of what we go through, of course, is attached to our assignment. But when we run from it, we're only prolonging the assignment. So had Hagar made it to her family's house, she was still going to be pregnant. She was still going to have to go back and find this baby's daddy eventually. It was still going to be a moment of confrontation with the past. So you could be running, but you're still going to have to face it eventually. So now you're just prolonging your process. So whatever you're running from, whatever your assignment is that you're running from, even if you don't know your assignment, somebody might be like, I don't think I have an assignment. I don't think I'm running. There's still a thing of being aware, like, okay, well, Lord, reveal to me what my assignment is. And maybe that, am I in process right now? Because that goes back to Ecclesiastes 3. There's a time and a season for everything, knowing what season that you're in your life. Some of us are in our wilderness season. Some of us are in our fulfilling the promise season. Some of us are just in the season of being processed. Some of us are just in the season of just trusting God. What season are you in? And it'll also help you reveal what your assignment is in this season, because sometimes it's just to work on you, to work on yourself. That can be an assignment in itself. All right. We're doing good on time. We're going to make it. So in verse 12, no, I don't know where these 12s came from. I was really sold on the thing. But chapter 16, verse 10 through 15. This is where the angel of the Lord begins to speak to Sarai and tell her things. And this is when she comes to full realization that, God, you see me. And she names him El Roy, the God who sees. She's actually the only person to give God a name in the Bible. And I would dare to say, I think she saw God, because she mentioned, I've actually seen you, and, basically I didn't die. Because who was that? Jacob saw the angel of the Lord, which many think the angel of the Lord is actually the Lord. And then many think it's just the messenger that is a sign, that works on behalf of the Lord. I've always thought it was the Lord. That's my personal opinion. It doesn't make it fact of, Bible, but that's my personal opinion. And so she actually saw the Lord, though. And so she was able to name him El Roy, because he said in verse 11, for the Lord has heard your cry of affliction. And then he begins to talk about her son. This man will be a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. He will settle near all his relatives. So she said the name of the Lord. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roy. For she said, in this place, I have actually seen the one who sees me. This is the first person that sees Hagar. And it's God. He's always seen her. She didn't know it. She didn't know that she was seen. She didn't know that in her seasons of being mistreated, in her season of feeling unheard, of being abandoned. I'm pretty sure being a Egyptian slave was not a walk in the park. Pretty sure she did not want to be there. Depending on her background, I can only imagine maybe feeling like if her parents were the one to give her over. That comes now, you got wounds from your mother wound, father wound. You got all kind of wounds that are inside of her that she has to address. But I believe in this moment that God healed her just by seeing her. Some of those emotions were healed because God saw her. And so she goes back. She has this baby. She names him Ishmael. Abraham was 86 years old when he has this baby. So that means that Sarai is still 76. And so that is her first wilderness experience. And I'm pretty sure it was a lot of lessons there. But we realize, Hagar is loved. So many things that she did not receive for years, now she has them because God saw her. So I wonder, did she go back to her assignment with a changed mindset? I'm pretty sure she did, because you know what's on the other side of your promise. You know what your son is going, how mighty your son is going to be. First of all, her son is her reward. And so, that's a blessing. Some of us, the things that we're pregnant with that we won't produce because we're fearful is our reward. And if we just produce it, there's a legacy that comes with it. I'm just giving this out, child. But yeah, there's legacy that comes with it. All right. This will be a yes or no question, but do you currently feel seen by God? If somebody wants to talk about it, feel free. Do you feel seen by him? And then explain why or why not. If you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable, it's okay. This is a good question to write down and really just marinate with the Lord. Okay, Lord, I don't feel seen. And then when if you don't feel like you're seen by God, this is when you begin to process some things that we need to do on our part. Are you spending time with him? Are you studying the word outside of just this call? Are you studying the word with, just you and God? Is he taking you through scripture? Are you praying consistently? And then when you pray, do you just get up and leave, or do you sit down and you listen to see what he has to say? Because sometimes he may give you one word, you may see a picture, but having those moments of communion with God will help you realize, like, Lord, you do hear me, you see me. He may even send a person to confirm some things that you've been asking him about, or that you've just been thinking about. Like, he will send different things to you to let you know that, hey, I hear you, I see you. And then there is a silent season. There's a time that we go through in our wilderness time where God's not saying a word. And I have a friend going through that right now, and her family is going through the most difficult thing. And she said, God is not speaking to me. And my response to her is, he's strengthening your faith. Because will you trust me when I don't speak? Like, sometimes with my son, we having a whole conversation. I'm over here doing a Bible study, and some things I'm not able to say out loud to him, but I can look at him and he'll know, okay, I can hand him something without me having to say a word. So God can still provide for you, even if he's not speaking, but you have to look for God in situations. So this is when you start to become aware that, okay, God, you may not be speaking in the way that I'm used to in past seasons, but I do see that you're still speaking to me through your word, because he's always speaking through our Bible. You pick this up, he's going to speak to you. It may not feel good. You might be like, well, it's good, but it doesn't solve the problem. Just heard something. Okay. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'm like, so in my emotions in a situation, I feel like God's not speaking, right? Like he's not answering my prayers. And then he will send, you or someone else to confirm what I know, or what I know the season that I'm in, right? And then, but in the emotions of a thing, I don't feel like he's talking or hears me or anything. But then once I come out of my emotions and he sends confirmation, it puts me right back into perspective. No, it does not feel good. No, it's not the exact answer that I'm looking for in the moment, because it's not an immediate fix. But I definitely know that I'm in a pruning season. So it's just difficult, and solitude is difficult, right? When you've got to walk through this season by yourself because no one else can get you through it. It definitely feels lonely on all aspects. Like, where are you? Like, why are you not holding my hand through this process? And it's like, it's not a hand holding season.
Not at all. It's development time. It's training grounds. We're in the military. I know Shakisha's gonna laugh, but we are in the military. And this is our training grounds. The wilderness season, it equips you, it cultivates you, it prunes you. It's a whole process to it. So it's not going to feel good in that time. And you're going to be, I can't even go to anybody because no one will understand, or I'm going to sound crazy. And so God, and I also want to emphasize this, there's a difference between solitude and isolation, because I know a lot of people think that solitude is isolation. It does not mean you have nobody. It just means God separates you. It's the consecration period. That's really what the wilderness is. It consecrates you. It really shows you how to depend on God. It shows you what's inside of you too. And so even to that point where Amber made, like, when we're in our flesh, this is on spiritually, these become closed, these eyes become closed, and we're going to see that with Hagar, because I'm in my flesh. I only see what I don't like is happening. But the moment we get out of our feelings and we're like, okay, I'm calmed down, I'm trusting you, God. You didn't gave it over to God. You might have repented, we might not have, give or take sometimes with that. And so that's when God will begin to speak, because now you've come out of flesh. Now I can talk to you. And so that can cause him to be silent as well. It's not that he's not talking. It's just that you're not listening with the right ears. you're only listening through an ear that wants to react rather than an ear that's willing to listen to God. And if he says to be quiet, be quiet. I've been in so many situations where I'm like, oh, I just want to give him a piece of my mind. And God says, shut up. Literally, that's what he says to me. He says to me, shut up. So I'm like, okay. And I have to be quiet, because if I say something, I'm only going to ruin my witness. And then I'm only going to throw myself behind, because this lesson might be over by me just being quiet. I might not have to go through this again, because God, okay, I can trust her. She knows how to be quiet and when to be quiet. So we ain't got to go through this again. So yeah, if you're not feeling seen, if you're not feeling heard by God, take some self-evaluation. Let's not be like Sarai and be pointing fingers like, well, God ain't doing this and God ain't said this and these people doing this and they not doing. What are you not doing, and what are you doing that you need to fix? It's in your control to change today. Because some things, okay, yes, God has to process us. He has to get us there. But there are some things that we know that we do that are not pleasing, that do not bring us closer to God, that we need to stop today. All right. Flight number 2. All right, I have 7 minutes. I think I can do it. So this one's short. This is when Sarah basically was like, well, she's Sarah now, because God and Abraham had a moment. And so his name is changed to Abraham, and God tells Abraham, you know, call your wife Sarah. She's going to have a child, and call her Sarah. All right. So Genesis 21, verse 15 to 21. These are the correct chapters and verse. I know the last few have been off. But verse 15, it says, when the water in the skin was used up. Oh, well, give background knowledge here. I'm sorry. So Sarah, basically, she has Isaac, and the boys are playing. She sees it. She gets in her feelings, and she's like, Abraham, you need to get rid of Hagar and that boy, because I don't want him taking my son's inheritance. They will not be a co-heir. Abraham feels away, because it's like, this is still my son. He goes to God. God says they're going to be taken care of, send them on to a certain place. And Abraham basically gets their stuff and said, all right, y'all got to go. And so now they're out the house. And so I'm pretty sure Hagar's like, no, if ain't this some stuff, because really, you didn't got me pregnant. Now you're going to kick me out with the kid that you got me pregnant with? This is crazy. So verse 15, it says, when the water in the skin was used up, she left the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him, about a bow shot away, for she said, do not let me see the boy die. And she sat opposite him and lifted up her voice and wept. For God heard the lad crying, and the angel of the Lord called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter with you, Hagar? Do not fear, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation of him. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad a drink. God was with the lad, and he grew. And he lived in the wilderness and became an archer. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. So this is to emphasize, God does hear you, but also sometimes our promises do speak. And because we birthed the promise, anything that promise needs will be taken care of. So when you birth your assignment, you don't have to worry about the resources. You don't have to worry about the people. Oh, this is a word for me. I receive it. You don't have to worry about it, because everything that you need is already there. But also, because when that thing has a need, God will take care of it, because it is a promise from him. So we see, let me see, I'm gonna go back to that. All right, so we see here Hagar, they're in the wilderness. I'm pretty sure she's in her feelings again. So it's like, I'm really upset, because I'm out here with my son in the wilderness, and I don't have anything. I don't even know how I'm going to feed my child. I don't know how I'm going to give him something to drink. I don't know. We don't know what we're going to do. And so she's crying, she's upset, but she hears nothing, right? But as soon as this baby cries, as soon as this promise cries, as soon as this promise has a need that is vocalized, the angel of the Lord appears, and it's like, what's the matter? And I also love that it says, do not fear. Yeah, just in the hallway with nothing crazy. He says, do not fear, which is the Lord's favorite thing to say. For God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. This reminds me of Daniel when he started to pray and the answer was already on the way. So as soon as this little boy started to cry, the answer was already on the way. And so now that the angel of the Lord is talking to Hagar, I'm pretty sure this sobers her up because, okay, wait, the Lord is here. Let me sober myself up. God opens her eyes. So now she physically sees that resource, the resource that she needed was right there the whole time. So what you need is already with you. What you need is already around you. And you can take that for whatever situation that you have a need right now. It's already around you, but you need to ask God to open up your eyes so that you can see the resources that you need. I'm doing that's good. Okay. I'm sorry, that was good for me. So yeah, so they filled up the skin with water. He had a drink, he grew up, he fulfilled everything that the angel Lord promised her in chapter 16 as well. So we see Hagar going from being abandoned to accepted. She went from abused to loved. She went from feeling overlooked to feeling seen. And I'm sure a lot of us can either, we can relate to one of these emotions at some point in our life. I know in the wilderness season, you can feel overlooked a lot because God's hiding you on purpose. He's hiding you because, first of all, you're not ready for the promise. It's not that it's not that the promise, that thing said it just ended, but it's not that the promise, I can actually stop sharing. Come on.
Turn it back on. I was watching that. Turn it back on.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. My bad. It's just okay. Let me see. It just went all the way to okay. So yeah, what was I saying, Lord? Bring that thought back to mind. Boop, boop, boop.
You were talking about hiding you on purpose.
Yes, he will hide you on purpose because sometimes we're not ready for our promise. And so he also, like, again, it goes back to that processing thing. You have to be cultivated because if he puts us out there in the middle of our promise and we have no tools, we don't have emotional intelligence. We don't know how to call on God. We don't know how to pray when things look crazy, because especially if you are a business owner or you work in anything business related, you can even be working corporate America. You will be in situations that's high pressure and it requires a lot of you. And you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. That's when you need to call on the Lord and know how to get the strategy and blueprints from heaven. Hagar did that. When she cried out in affliction, she travailed. Crying out in affliction reminds me of childbirth. It's like, this hurts. I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do. So I'm just going to scream and cry out. She cried out in affliction. God heard her son's cry. I know he heard her cry as well. But that process, it teaches you how to cry out to God. The wilderness season is necessary. But before we go in it, and when we get in it, we need to know how to regulate our emotions and not allow the wilderness to affect how we respond. Because God is watching it all to see how much longer do you have to stay in this thing. Because some of us will stay in the wilderness longer than we have to, which we see with the children of Israel. They complained, they grumbled, they made all kind of false gods, they did everything wrong. And so they were in the wilderness longer than they had to be. But had they had emotional intelligence, had they trusted God for real, and not just trusted in what he said that day and like, okay, I trust you right now in this moment because you just said it, but as soon as I see the opposite, I don't trust you no more. Like, had they had trust for real, they probably would have exited the wilderness way sooner. So I believe Hagar is a great example of how we can't allow our past trauma to affect our responses in the wilderness. It's easy to rely on what you know to do or what you saw done. It takes intentionality to say, I'm not going to respond from a place of abandonment. I'm going to respond as if I'm already accepted because I am wanted by God, because I am loved by God, because I am seen by God. And I know it's it's easy to think about man, like they don't see me, they don't accept me, they don't. What about, whatever, we don't care about them. We care, but we don't, so I pray tonight it brought some sense of revelation, understanding, and even just confirmation to what you may be going through personally, have gone through, especially with the wilderness season. Anything, let me see, anybody have anything in the chat? Now, if you want to come off mute and share anything, can I unshare the screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
And then did you say that promises speak? Is that what you said?
Promises do what?
Speak.
Promises do speak.
Okay, I just need to make sure you said that. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Promises do speak. I remember a dream that I had a few months ago, where God had, one of my college professors come to me in a dream, and she was like, anything that your sons need, just ask for it, God will give it to them. So anytime there's a need for those kids, I'm like, first of all, those are promises, because my first child was a miscarriage. And so God began to show me my kids. I was prophesied kids before I even had kids. So I'm like, okay, obviously these are promises from God. So my promises, when they have a need, when they express a need, God, they have a need, and I don't know how I'm gonna do it. He supplies all the time. Even with this ministry, like there are needs that we have. I'll write the vision. Okay, Lord, I'm seeing this. It costs this much to do. He provides. So whatever your promise is, write it out. Strategize with God. Create a blueprint, create a strategy. And it may not be time to implement certain things today, but a part of your process is writing out the vision. A part of your process is truly getting that vision, getting that promise, and understanding how to strategize to do what you need to do on your part. Because some of our part is just reading the word. Just that simple. Like God just wants to spend time with you. The wilderness teaches you how to be uncomfortable, not for a temporary season, like this is just what it is. Because after this wilderness season, you have promotion. If we look at Joshua, he was the next one to lead after Moses. But he was ready because he had watched, he had served, he was equipped. And so now you're getting the tools. No, sorry. You're getting the tools and the strategies that you need. Okay, give me 1 second. Getting the tools and the strategies that you need now, so that you can lead in that next place. And so I do want to say congratulations to everyone on this call. It may feel like, what? It doesn't feel like a congratulations. But it's a congratulations season. When you enter the wilderness season, that means God is promoting you. And so, yeah, congratulations. If we don't know how long it's going to be, but you can have a graduation party soon. I know I started having all these dreams about me passing tests. I remember one specifically, I was at a school and I was handed a paper and it had 100 on it. And it was like, and the teacher was like, congratulations, you passed. And so I was like, Lord, does this mean it's over? I don't have to go through this no more. And I started getting all these words like, you've had years and seasons, but now God is about to give you the reward. Like you're coming into those joyful times. And so I do see that starting to happen in my life. So I want to be a testament that it ends. There's an end to it, no matter how uncomfortable it is. But it's also a beautiful process. When I look back on those years, they were still great years. God did not strip me in a way that made me hate what was happening. But it was always good. It was always good for me. It always just gave me more understanding of who I was. I didn't have to wait for a person to tell me, Crystal, this is what you are. Because in the wilderness season, I was so hungry and so thirsty to understand and to know that I sought after him with all my heart. And he would reveal all these things. Like I ain't gonna say one because that word still a little cringy to me, but I know that's what I am. And so it's like I didn't have to wait.
Prophetess Crystal.
I
I
don't.
was like, who gonna do it? Me or Krisha? Who gonna do it?
It's still a little cringy. Like I'm still like, I think about Joseph, he getting his new garments, and like I can imagine Joseph with this boy's like, man, these things kind of big. That's how it feels. It's like, I don't know, it's still a little uncomfortable. I'm growing comfortable with it. But it's like I didn't have to wait, or I don't have to even wait for my pastor to publicly say it, because I know what God has said in the private times. And so I'm like, now I just go do what he tells me to do. And so yeah, the wilderness season is needed. It's a
It's
beautiful,
giving.
it's awkward.
It's giving knowing who your identity is.
Exactly what it is. That, yeah, it's identity. Yeah, it's so much. It's so much, and it's a weighty thing. That's why I'm so excited about this series, because every person shows a different aspect of what the wilderness season is actually about. I wish more people would teach on it, because yeah, I didn't have nothing to read about.
You are the people. What are you talking about? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I gotta write the book now, huh? Because I'm like, this is definitely like something. Because it's so good to me. I'm like, I don't know if this is good to anybody else, but like I said, I'm like, these next few weeks, it's good to me. So yeah,
Yeah, because I'm like, prayer. I was like, Crystal, get out of my life. Okay. I don't just mind your business, pray about someone else. But I was like, oh, okay, this is what you're about to take us through. And then it was definitely confirmation today. I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah,
This is the journey we're on. Lord, I'm listening. You got my attention. Okay. I get it.
yes, yes. I'm excited. I'm excited for y'all. That's why I knew, I was like, these Bible studies for this for this series, God was like, it's not gonna be everybody, but those that show up are the ones that he's training for what's next. And I dare say leadership. So yeah, this isn't a series that's for everybody. So that's why I say
I was
congratulations.
hoping you weren't going to repeat that because I heard you say that when you were talking about what Bible study. I was like, okay, ma'am. Hey,
Yeah, it's a
simmer down.
and I'm sorry to the people that don't go to our church. 3 of us do on the call. That's funny. So our Pastor Kim, she said on Sunday, like the wilderness season is a season of development. And I believe she said it's a season for leaders, like where leaders are developed. I believe that's what she said. If not, somebody else has confirmed it. And so I was like, oh wow. A lot of people have been confirming what we're going to talk about. And so yeah, y'all are leaders, in your respective places. That doesn't look like, it may not look like the church. I knew early on, like, yes, I'm gifted. I can do what I do in the church, but I knew I was never meant to be confined to the 4 walls. So don't ever think that if God told you ministry, it means that you're supposed to be in a pulpit. It don't have to look like that. This is ministry. I'm at home. My kids are in there. I don't know what they're doing. They're doing something. So like, this is ministry. I'm able to be comfortable, and I don't have to preach like TD Jakes and be out of breath, I can talk like Crystal because I'm not a hooper. So I want y'all to know, like, your ministry can look different. And so yes, congratulations, y'all. But yeah, I've held y'all long enough. I think we go overtime every time. But I am grateful that y'all are here. I'll send a replay tomorrow. I'm actually going to cut the beginning and then the prayer because it was personal prayer requests. And so I want to make sure that those parts are cut out. If you want, like, at least if you want that part of the prophetic word that you got, I can send you the whole thing so you can just access that.
Yes, thank you. That would be great.
So I'll send you the full video, but I won't upload the full thing to YouTube. All right, Angelina, we're glad to see you here today. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're not worried about the time. Like I try to talk. Yes. Okay. All right, y'all. I love y'all and see y'all on Tuesday.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Crystal. Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.